Welcome to the Unbecoming Hub podcast. Reflections about being human without treating yourself as something to fix. I'm your host, Lacey Kelly. For today's episode, I wanted to answer a question. And this question came through from someone who's started the process of unbecoming. And I think it's a really good question and maybe one that will come up quite a bit. So I wanted to address it here. Question is, I've done a lot of therapy, journaling, and self-work, and I intellectually understand myself pretty well. But I still find myself reacting the same ways in my relationships, and my body still holds a lot of tension. When you talk about unbecoming, how is this different from just doing more insight work? What actually changes when someone moves from understanding themselves to living from that place? I think this is a great question for a lot of reasons. One, it speaks to that frustration of understanding yourself and this feeling like awareness should be enough to change something. And the frustration that can come when you're doing some kind of inner work or awareness work and things aren't changing. And the question, how is unbecoming any different from just more of that? I think it's totally a fair question. And when I think about answering it, I had this memory pop up that seems unrelated, but it fits. One day I was walking through Target, this was several years ago, and I remember this song came on over the speakers, and I started singing it, and I paused, and I was like, how the heck do I know this song? If I recall correctly, I think it was a Taylor Swift song, and I'm not a Swiftie, forgive me, don't come after me. But I've never intentionally played Taylor Swift. And yet I knew every single word to this song. And it kind of was one of those moments where I felt a little disturbed. I'm like, how did this happen? How have I come to know every single lyric to a Taylor Swift song when I've never actually played it myself? And it made me think, what else is in my brain that I didn't choose to think? What else is in my brain that I didn't choose to believe? What kind of subliminal messaging is out there that's shaping my reality without me even knowing it? It was kind of one of those like mind melting moments where all of a sudden everything looks like a kaleidoscope. I don't know if you've had one of those moments, but they kind of happen to me a lot. And I think that's a good place to start to answer this question. Because in inner work and self-help and all this whole world, this world of therapy and things, I think it's worth looking at what is the premise that you're taking into the work that you don't know you're taking into the work? What is the dominant narrative of all of these things that we're doing out there that influence the way it unfolds? And from best as I can tell, from being inside of it, having done a lot of it, and being a therapist, the premise is something is wrong with me. So we don't start to seek self-help unless we think we need help, unless there's something that needs fixing. So we bring this premise into the process. When we're starting from that premise of there's something wrong with me, I need fixing, this is broken, it could be better, we set ourselves up to have a bit of a hamster wheel experience because we're just kind of trying to get to the next phase of self-realization that makes it all feel okay. And I'm not saying this is wrong or bad or doesn't make sense that we go to self-help because we think we need help. I mean, of course, there are things that we do, ways that we react that can be damaging to our lives. It makes sense to have a belief, I want to change this, and that we find the things that help us do that. But once we enter the self-help world or the therapy world, if that message continues to echo back to us over and over, how are we ever supposed to get out of it? So a lot of the models out there operate in agreement with that premise. So you come to self-help thinking, I need help, there's something wrong with me. And then the framework that you're being met with says, yes, you do need help, and here's how you can fix it. And so it colludes with this premise of, I'm broken, there's something wrong with me, I need fixing. And unbecoming and the process of unbecoming does not agree with the premise that you're coming to self-help for. And that's how it's different. So you might enter self-help saying, there's something wrong with me, I need fixing. And the first thing we would say is that true? Is there actually something wrong with you? Or has there been different kinds of conditioning in your life that has led you to show up the way you have? So first we would question your premise, and then we would start with a different premise and say, actually, there's nothing wrong with you. You are already an inherently whole and worthy and complete human being. And the thing that you're coming to self-help for, whatever reaction, pattern, tendency, thing of that nature, is an adaptation that you have had to use to maintain connection in your life, and it can be undone. So we start with this different premise of you are already whole and complete and inherently worthy as a person. And then we start to look at what has obscured that over time. So in order for unbecoming to work, you also have to agree with the premise. And that's where there can be some tension. Where, oh no, I don't believe I'm whole and worthy and complete as a person. That's why I'm getting help. And yeah, that makes sense. So this basic premise that we start with, you are already whole, complete, and worthy inherently as a human being, often becomes an intellectual buy-in first. And that intellectual buy-in to the premise can actually be a simple reframe because it doesn't require you to believe that at first. It doesn't require you to feel that in your bones and deep in your cells. We get to that later. But we want to get to a place where it's okay, I can get on board with this. And that wholeness and completeness and worthiness as a person, I like to think about it this way. When you think about the nature of a child, you think about a newborn baby, infant, toddler, child, whatever age, there's really no doubt that they are worthy of love and belonging. There's an inherent wholeness to them. If you've ever interacted with a baby, I see it in my son all the time. There's no reservation. He's just here. His eyes are open. And when I say open, I mean when you look at them and you look into them, there's not these layers of fear and conditioning and apprehension and skepticism. He's just aware. He's just looking at you, taking you all in. It's the most magical feeling ever. And when I take him in, it's just obvious. There is an inherent worthiness, belonging, and completeness to him. And I've never really met anybody that doesn't agree with that about a baby or a child. It's often why we say children are the best teachers. If you don't agree with it, I'd love to have a back and forth about it with you. But let's say, okay, Lacey, I'm on board with that. I can look at a baby or a child and feel that inherent worthiness. Like, of course, I would never look at a baby and say, you're not worthy of love or belonging. So, okay, I can get on board with that. Well, the next step is, okay, so that baby has inherent worth, completeness to them. When exactly do they lose it? Right? So if so many of us as adults are walking around out there feeling incomplete, unworthy, and undeserving, at what point exactly did that wholeness and worthiness you see in that baby or child disappear? So you follow that baby. Okay, now they're a toddler. Are they still worthy of love and belonging? Yes. Okay, now they're a child. Ask the same question. A teenager, a young adult. Like, at what point in life do you look at another human being and say, okay, now at this point, you have lost your worthiness and you have lost your love and belonging. Now you don't deserve it. Like, at what point would you say that to another human? And sometimes I get people to say, well, I would say that to someone who's committed crime or has done wrong or has hurt somebody. Okay, fair. Would that person have done those things if they felt whole and complete in who they are? A lot of the time, behavior that we would deem as bad is coming from a place within that person is believing they are bad, so might as well live up to the title. So if we just remove that out of the equation for a moment, because that can get into a whole other philosophical debate, but we're just saying, okay, now you don't deserve it. Is there ever a point that makes sense to do? And if it does come down to someone's behavior, well, where is that behavior coming from within the person? So when we take a step back, we look at inherently worthy, inherently whole. We follow that thread in a person. I kind of like to see it as like a little golden light, like a little soul, a little golden light in that baby. And then you watch the body age. If you move that body forward in time, you watch it age. You look at the little light in the person, a little golden light in the center of their torso, maybe. Does it ever actually go away? Or does the person begin to believe it doesn't exist? Does the person begin to believe they don't have that golden light through environmental influence, condition of their environment, the systems they're in? This is the whole idea at Unbecoming You, is that golden light that's been there from day one has never actually left you, and it cannot leave you. You can only come to believe it didn't exist. You can only come to think it was never there by the conditioning of the environment around you. It's living in ignorance to it. It doesn't mean it's not there. So that's the premise. The premise is you are already whole and complete. That is inherent to you. It has always been here. Nothing can take it away. That golden light in you is infinite. So if you're coming to self-help with that premise, okay, I believe intellectually, I don't feel it yet in my bones, but intellectually, I'm on board. I'm whole and complete. Okay, well, now we're in the first step of unbecoming. Because you've now just consciously chosen what you want your premise to be. And this is the process of unbecoming in action. that you became aware of the premise you were coming into self-help with. You examined it, you looked at it. Do I actually believe that? Is there another way to believe, another thing to think? Even if it doesn't feel true yet. Okay, yeah, that one resonates with me. I'm going to choose to enter on that premise. And now you can start to live the work differently. And that right there is the process of unbecoming. Phase 1, we had awareness. What's the premise I came to self-help with? Phase 2, I don't actually believe that. So I'm going to shed that and see what else is out there. Phase 3, alignment. Okay, this is the premise I want to operate from. That's what emerges from within myself. That's what feels true. Phase 4, embodiment. Now I'm going to live it. Now I'm actually going to approach self-help with that premise and see what changes. And phase 5, integration. I'm probably going to forget and I'm back at phase 1, awareness. Phase 5 is kind of like an umbrella. It's like a hug that hugs all of the other phases because it's kind of always happening simultaneously to all of the other ones. But this is how the process of unbecoming can affect even a micro decision like that. So it's a process that is within even little moments like that, but can also encompass the bigger overarching sense of self. But the self is made up of all these tiny little beliefs and moments. So it works in both directions. So we're coming back to the question. When you talk about unbecoming, how is it different from just doing more insight work? Biggest difference, we operate from a very different premise. There has to be buy-in to the premise. But if you intellectually get on board with that idea that you are whole and complete and worthy from day one, it cannot be taken from you. It's always been here. It's just about unraveling all the conditioning that has told you otherwise. That's how it's different. And even in that, this comes to the second half of the question, what actually changes when someone moves from understanding themselves to living from that place? Even that buy-in can alleviate a lot of suffering and pressure and tension to achieve and to strive and to be better. It's like, okay, I may not feel that in my bones yet, but I can understand how it could be true. Let's explore. Now you're in the work of phase 1, awareness, where you're just collecting information about your experience. What conditioning has begun to layer on top of cover up that golden light in you? What beliefs started to accumulate that led you to turn away from that golden light and believe that it was never there? So we're collecting. Phase 1 is just noticing. Okay, now I've noticed. I know all these things, right? I understand myself intellectually. Phase 2, shedding. Now we look at the beliefs that we hold. Do I actually believe them? And if I do believe them, can I understand how I came to believe them? So, for example, I used to have a belief that my value was dependent on how much somebody needed me. So in my family role growing up, I was a bit of the peacekeeper. And I tended to collect a lot of friendships around me that were based on crisis, you could say. I was the one someone called. I was the person that would go if someone was in trouble. I was like that responsible friend. We all had one of those. I was that one. And I internalized a belief, I didn't know it that I did this, but I internalized a belief that my value is dependent on others needing me. And, that gets tiring. You burn out on it. I kind of reached a point in my life where that wasn't working anymore. And I started to get avoidant. I would, fall off the map sometimes, just go in a hole, stop answering text messages. I would just totally shut down. Started to burn out. And it was in that burnout I started to reflect, like, why am I doing this, And that belief surfaced through awareness. Belief surfaced. I thought, is that true? Well, it feels true. Okay, well, how did I come to believe that? I can understand my role as a peacekeeper in the family, that I internalized this belief. It turned me away from that golden light in myself. But that was never true. I still had value in my home, even if I wasn't keeping the peace. I still had value as a person if I wasn't responding to the crisis of a friend. So I got to choose. No, that doesn't actually feel true about me. And the shedding creates the space for what does feel true to emerge on its own. And this is another shift in the process of unbecoming. Not trying to make a different belief happen, but when you shed the belief that doesn't fit or that you unconsciously internalize, like I did that song in Target, like I didn't choose to have this belief. I unconsciously internalized it from the conditions around me. So when we shed that, now there's space. And for a lot of people, this space can be uncomfortable. It can feel like, oh, I want to fill this with something or do something. But when you allow it, that's when the truth emerges of who you really are. Which leads into the next phase, phase 3, alignment. When that emergence is happening, you're understanding what your values are as a person, what your boundaries are, and what your needs are. And those become your compass. And they're not rooted in what other people want you to value or what other people think your boundaries should be or what other people think you should need. They're rooted in the emergence of what comes from that golden light within you. They emerge from the space that's created when you shed. So now you're living in alignment with that golden light. And that is effortless. It's easy. It's breezy. There's not so much tension and clinging in that. Doesn't mean we're not going to have our moments. There's always other layers that shed. That's phase 5. We'll get into that later, but that's the idea of phase 3. So now we're living it, which leads into phase 4, embodiment. Now we're living that golden light that's inside. Living as it. And this is when our relationships really start to take place. We may find we settle in a little more into life, feel a little more grounded. We're not so seeking oriented. I used to be the seeker of all seekers. If there was something to seek, I would find it. I mean, constantly looking for answers outside of myself. And when I allowed that space to emerge, everything just went quiet. Like, oh, I actually don't need to do that. It's enough to just simply be. And that's the phase of embodiment, is really cultivating that capacity for space. Which leads into phase 5, integration, which is that hug of all the phases that says, it doesn't last. You'll want to become something else, like a podcaster or a content creator or a mother or a wife or whatever. You're going to want to become another thing. And then you're going to get attached to that identity. And that's going to show up in a lot of ways. And then voila, we're back at phase 1. Here we go. And phase 5 invites, that's just the nature of things, man. That's just it. There is no end, but it doesn't have to feel like, oh my God, the work is just work for the rest of my life. It's exhausting. It doesn't have to feel like that. It's just much more matter of fact. Because we're releasing the grip and the tension around having to have an outcome. So what actually changes when someone moves from understanding themselves to living in that place? The pressure is gone. The striving stops. You get to breathe. because you have awareness. You can understand the conditioning that's taken place that has turned you away from your golden light. Once you have that awareness, you can choose. And if it doesn't feel accessible to say, no, that's not true, then you can learn to understand how you came to be that way, and that softens the grip. And then there's space, and what emerges is the alignment of yourself, your compass, what you truly feel and believe and think and need and value. And then you just get to live. Then you're in it. And simultaneously, that phase 1 is happening in the background, just staying aware, noticing, not as like this scanner for the shoe to drop, but just open, curious. And then we do it all again. Because it's a season, it's a change, it's just life, you know? So that is how unbecoming is different from more insight work. I don't even call it work. I actually try really hard to intentionally not use that word. I don't have to try as hard anymore because I just don't see it as work, so it naturally doesn't come out as the word work. It's a process. It's just a process. And it's a process that's always in process. So there we have it. If you have any more questions, I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear more questions. I like answering questions. It helps me frame my mind a little differently, gets me talking a little more natural on this podcast. I've had some feedback that it doesn't sound like me. I'm like, well, I can't very well have a podcast about unbecoming and not sound like myself. So here I am. Anyway, send some questions. There's a podcast form on the podcast page on the website. You can submit a question or a thought or a topic or a fragmented sentence, whatever you want to engage. It's fun for me. And hopefully it's fun for you. So that's it for today. I'll see you next time. You can find more of this work at theunbecominghub.com. Until next time.